Hey, what's up guys? Welcome to this video. My name is Chris. I'm a creative entrepreneur, and in this video I'm going to talk about ayahuasca in general. So this would be drinking ayahuasca after just posting about changa, which thank you guys for the engagement, thank you for the questions, thank you for the comments, and thank you for the interest, because I absolutely love talking about these experiences, because as a creative entrepreneur and somebody who's self-employed and works on themselves, like plant medicine has, as a whole, it has changed my life. It's essentially grown my creativity. It's pretty much shown me where my blind spots are, and it's helped me grow as a person, as a creative, as an entrepreneur. It's just helped me grow in every level of life, and that's why I want to share it with you, because it is such a remarkable experience. And the first thing I want to start with is, if you're being called to ayahuasca, like, you'll know it, like you'll hear everybody talking about it, or maybe like I'm the one who's starting to pique that interest in you, as I sat with it back in October. So it's still pretty fresh in me. And why it's still fresh, I want to share that experience to anybody who's interested in ayahuasca, because it is such a cool experience. And a lot of the media that people talk about ayahuasca is kind of like they had really hard journeys and stuff. And I've never had a super bad journey with it. I've had a couple lessons when I smoked changa, but actually sitting and drinking ayahuasca was like, it was a profound, amazing experience. So let's talk about that. So before you even sit with ayahuasca, what you have to do is a diet. And this is one of the reasons that I love smoking changa as opposed to sitting with ayahuasca and drinking it, because the Ayahuasca Dieta, or diet, is typically 2 weeks. And essentially the simplest way to put it is you eat a bland diet of fruits and vegetables. So you have no salt, no sugar, no oils was the toughest one. No spices, and I think that was essentially it. Oh yeah, no meat. Some allow fish for 7 days, and the last 7 days is pretty much no fats, which can be a little difficult, especially with the American diet. And it was actually the toughest part was the diet for me, because let's be honest, I'm a creative entrepreneur. I kind of eat like a child, but I also like have such a crazy workflow that I'm just eating when I can and what I can, So that was one of the toughest parts. And then along with that, no alcohol, no weed, no sex, no caffeine. So you're essentially living life as a human for 2 weeks before you sit with it, because essentially ayahuasca is DMT. And you can't process DMT without the MAOI inhibitor, which prolongs the breakdown of DMT with an enzyme. So that allows you to experience the benefits of ayahuasca or DMT, because otherwise, like, we all experience DMT, like, when you wake up in the morning. This is actually a pretty cool trick. You can, right when you wake up, go to your bathroom or turn on the light and squint your eyes really hard. You'll see triangles, or at least I see these triangles that are in a perfect circle in unison. And it's after sitting with, DMT plant medicines, like, I know what it looks like, and I'm like, oh, this is so cool. But back to ayahuasca. So there's like a microdose of it. But when you do this dieta, it's essentially to cleanse your body as a whole, because MAOI inhibitors, from just like the medical field, if you look at them, they interact with everything. They interact with absolutely everything. So like, as that being a major component of ayahuasca, what you're essentially doing is just cleansing your body. And this is the most important part, because if you don't do this, Aya will be cleaning you out during the ceremony. And then those are more of the cases that I think you hear, the like kind of the horror stories of people having tons of purges, having these rough experiences, because I took the diet very seriously, and previously, playing around with plant medicines or experiencing multiple ceremonies. And I knew the dieta is like one of the most important parts. So that is, to me, like one of the big stop signs for me, as opposed to not sitting with ayahuasca, is just the dieta is so tough. But also, in saying that and sitting with ayahuasca, the dieta was probably the most beneficial part for me, because I saw exactly how eating very healthy foods and letting go of all my vices brought me energy and excitement into my life. And then afterwards, I kind of got back on the trail of where I was at, which I've been working to get back on the path of eating healthy and whatnot. But let's get to the actual ayahuasca experience. So when you sit with ayahuasca, typically it's 2 days or 3 days retreats. And sometimes they'll break them up, where you do a day on, a day off, a day on, a day off, a day on, or you'll go back-to-back days. And typically when you sit with ayahuasca, they offer you 2 cups, but personally I did 1 day journey, which is, we'll get to the end. I'll close this up of the ayahuasca experience of why I only sat on 1 day instead of 2. But when you're in the ceremony, essentially you drink, I think it's about 5 mils of ayahuasca. And honestly, like ayahuasca doesn't taste very good. It's got this citrusy, unforgettable taste that you'll never forget, and it's very distinct. But you essentially get there and, you go through the pre-ceremony stuff of like grounding meditation, maybe some hape just to help you ground. And then what we did was one by one come up and drink it. And I'll never forget drinking it. Because you can just feel it. I felt like it all the way down and sit on my stomach, and it's kind of like a thicker, like molasses-y kind of texture, substance. I don't know. But when you're sitting with ayahuasca, from there, like you drink it, and we went back and sit, and our steward, she was saying to just sit upright as long as you can. And this is when the cool magic of the whole experience happened, was when I was just sitting there and I'm waiting for it, and then I just got called to lay down. So then I lay down on my back. And I kept seeing these visual images of Sphinx pose, so laying on my stomach, pretty much prone like this. And I was just like, why am I seeing Sphinx? And it wouldn't leave my mind. And then, it showed me it a couple times. And on the third time, I was like, gosh, all right, let's just go to Sphinx pose. So this leaves, and then boom, there's Aya. And when I say there's Aya, it's like visually from Changa. Changa's more visual than the visuals I had drinking ayahuasca, but the visuals of Changa that I was familiar with of Aya just came in, and I'm like, hi, how are you? Good friend. And what I won't share the specifics of my experience, but this is all leading up to what my ayahuasca experience and what I think you can kind of plan to experience. Like, you can never know what you're going to see. Every Aya journey is different, but like, I recognized Aya, and she appeared the same in Changa as she did when I sat with ayahuasca. And it's just like, I'd say it's like my playful aunt. She's just like kind of silly, kind of crazy, but kind of serious. And like, if I get out of alignment, she's like, hey, get back. And I'm like, okay, but very fun. And that's what my experience with ayahuasca as a whole is, it's always very playful. It's always very fun. She's always very like, loosen up, Chris. Like, just go with the flow, have some fun. And then I'll get a little too loose, and she'll be like, hey, stop. And I'm like, whoop, my bad. And then even like in part of my ayahuasca ceremony, there were 3 major lessons that I got. It was self-doubt, it was lack, and the other was like where to sit with my energy, in a sense. So essentially, like, summing up my seated journey was about like 4 to 6 hours. I'd have no awareness of time just by kind of judgment of the experience, I guess. But it essentially took me on a giant loop, and it played this loop out twice over those hours. And the main theme that happened was essentially like Aya took me up and we're up in, like, on a scale from 0 to 100. We were at 100. We're playing. We're having fun. I'm like, this is awesome. This is beautiful. I love all this. She's showing me all this cool stuff. And then all of a sudden, I get the vision of my bucket in my head. And I was like, oh, God, I couldn't grab it quick enough. And I just start purging. And that was something that I was kind of afraid of, was purging in ayahuasca, because I don't like throwing up, right? But I remember that purge was just so releasing. And the irony was, I was like, I got done throwing up, and I was like, what the fuck, Aya? Like, why would you do that? Like, we were on 100, and she took me down to 0. And the more I focused on the negativity, that was the third lesson. The more I focused on, like, the harshness of purging, the more I purged. And I quickly learned it. And that's the thing about ayahuasca, is like, for me, the lessons are very simple. There's no emotion. There's nothing but what's happening. And you're like, oh, that's what she's teaching me. So then as soon as I realized that, I'm like, all right, let's go back up. So we went back up, and we'd ride high, and then she'd slam me down, and I'd purge again. And instead of like sitting in the negativity that time, I'm like, oh, I learned my lesson. That sucks, but let's feel good again. And that was the lesson, was like, life just essentially has ups and downs, right? And when you go down, don't sit in the down. Go back up as soon as you can. And you do that by focusing on positivity. You focus on the feelings. And that's what she kept circling, was every time I went down, she's like, Chris, what are you wanting in life? And I was like, love, expansion, openness. And it just said all these words. And as soon as I focused on those vibrations, I went back up. God, that was wild. And then something else she would do is like, we'd go down these paths, and she would introduce something new to me, and it'd feel good, and it was back on 100, then it'd start to feel kind of wonky, and I'd catch her and be like, hey, Aya, what's going on here? Like, this feels off. And she'd be like, good catch, Chris. And then she'd send me back up. But essentially, like, what she was doing there was teaching me, like, relationships and lessons and stuff, I think, was essentially like, we start partnerships, they feel great, whether it's relationships, friendships, business partnerships. And when they start to feel off, a tendency I have is like, just ignore it or bypass and be like, it's all right, it'll be fine. but she was really showing me that I'm sensing something is off and I need to speak up and I need to call out somebody or I need to set a boundary because something's going a little wayward. And then beyond that, this is the wildest one. At the end of my journey, and she also showed me a bunch of stuff about like my future life that I really don't want to share because I can't wait to see it happen, but it has to do with space. I'll give you guys that. And the themes around space are insane. But the last lesson was at the very end of the ceremony, and I got hit with this lack lesson. This was lack and self-doubt. And she told me, because we went on October 23rd, and then we were going to sit again on the 25th, and she told me at the end of this, at the very end, after she looped me through everything twice, she's like, don't come back on the 25th. And I was like, am I making this up? And she's like, no. And I was like, with my eyes closed because I had the visuals, I was like, what is the date of the next sitting? And I see 25 in my head, and I was like, and I'm not to come back. I'm not making this up. And she's like, yes. And that was from a previous lesson of Changa. One time I finished the sitting and I wanted to go back in, and she's like, don't come back in. And I went back in and I got a lesson. And I was like, I'll never go in when she tells me this again. And then after that sitting, even though I was supposed to sit on the 25th, I was like, I remember coming out of it and I was like, yeah, Aya told me not to come back on the 25th. And people are like, well, are you afraid? Are you afraid to go deeper and all this stuff? And I'm like, no, I'm not afraid to go deep. I was like, I made it very clear not to come back, and I'm going to honor that. And it's so funny how the people there were trying to push me to go back in when I knew 100% not to go back in, which is, I think, a tendency I have is like, I know very clearly what to do and what not to do. And sometimes I'll let other people's judgment share or influence what I actually do. And this time I was like, nope, I've gone back in when I said no, and I know that was a bad sitting, and I could only imagine that for 4 to 6 hours. I am not going to experience that. And then afterwards, I shared it with somebody else at a fitness club I'm teach yoga at, and the guy's like, dude, like, that's awesome that you listened, like, you had good discipline, you trusted yourself, like, way to go, bro. And it's so funny to see the spectrum of the people who were around me that were kind of like pushing me to go back that extra day because they thought I was afraid or whatever. And then this other guy who sat with ayahuasca a lot too, he was like, no, bro, like, you honored yourself, you honored your lesson, you honored your discipline, and you trusted yourself, way to go. And like, that was just a really cool moment in seeing that lesson come to full circle. But as a whole though, ayahuasca, like, that was what happened in the ceremony, but the main beef of the whole experience happened on both ends of it. So as soon as I signed up to sit with ayahuasca, the relationship I was in instantly broke. And that's something like ayahuasca will do for you. Is like, I call it a massive growth accelerator or catalyst. Is if something's not aligned in your life, it will just like knock it off, and you have two options. You can resist it or you can surrender to it. And in knowing that, when I saw it crumbling, like, it was this weird experience in my life where I was like, this is something meaningful to me, but ayahuasca says it's not aligned, and I'm going to trust that, and literally like just went with it. And then after ayahuasca, had to deal with multiple boundary issues, just one after another. And everybody in my life was asking for more and more out of me. And they were like, kind of like making me feel guilty and shameful because I wasn't able to do enough, because they're like, bro, I'd been traveling for work. I've been doing client work. I've been doing edits. Like, I've been going pretty much nonstop since March, and this was October. And it was just like boundary. People like, we need more. And I was just like, I hit a point where I just had to tell people like, hey guys, I understand that you're asking more from me, but here's where I'm already applying my value, and here's why I think I've already given you enough. And I had to tell people that I was essentially giving them enough, and I had to draw a line and set strong boundaries and be like, this is my max. We aren't going any further. And that lesson, and I know that was a lesson because after sitting with ayahuasca, it kept on appearing. And that's what I would share with you, is like the biggest lesson I learned from ayahuasca is like, be very observant of your life as soon as you sign up for it and as soon as afterwards you sit with it, because it'll be very clear the lessons that come to you, and it's your job to spot it and lean into the discomfort, because setting those boundaries and, just being very, I don't want to say strict with people, but strong with people and holding that boundary and telling them where my limit was very uncomfortable for me. But in a sense, like, as it appeared, I got better and better at it, and to the point that I was just like, oh my gosh, like, how many more times is it going to show up? But it showed up as many times as I needed it to master that lesson. And like the other one with like lack showed up by not getting to sit with that second day. And then I had instances where lack was showing up, and I was spotting it, and I was like, all right. For instance, it was like in Bali for a retreat. Like we were out there for 2 weeks and we stayed in the same place for a week, which is not my style of travel. And I felt this lack. I was like, I'm in Bali. I want to go to Canggu. I want to go to, Una Pinsa or Pinsa Una. Like I want to go to all these spots and we're stuck in the same spot. But then I was like, oh, there's that lack coming in again. But it's just the overall ability to spot what is showing up in your life and not viewing it as a victim, but being like, this is clearly showing me what I need to work on to grow and to get to the next level. And now it's, February? I think February 1st today. So end of October, so November, December, January. So 3 months after sitting with ayahuasca, I've really felt like I've integrated in the lessons, and integration's the most important part of the journey. Like you can sit in this and have the magical experience and learn the lessons on both ends, but until you integrate that into your life, you don't really see the benefit of that setting, of that ceremony, of everything that you learned and everything that Aya wanted to show you. And I think I feel like I've grown into an entirely different person. And ironically, like that also caused like a death and a rebirth. And I feel like I'm finally on the end of rebirth coming out of ayahuasca, where I'm still peeling back the final layers because my energy levels have been like rock bottom. Like Aya showed me like, dude, you're doing too much on your own. Like, work with people, stop focusing on how, focus on the who. Like all the books, knowledge, information, people, experiences that came into my life after sitting with ayahuasca and integrating those lessons has been awesome. And it's also led me to a spot where I just feel like, I'm just like jumping back into entrepreneurship again. It's very similar to those feelings. Like I kind of don't know where life's going. And that's been a big part of my lesson, is just to trust, have faith, stay positive. Like no matter where you're going, no matter what you're doing, like you're protected. The universe is essentially here to help you, and it's your job to let go of the stuff that isn't aligning with you anymore, to create space for stuff that is aligning. And that's what I've been doing. And even like I've been double downing my self-care. I've been really working on branding and expanding and launching my business, Weekender Collective. I've been working on replacing myself in my video production business with a videographer and an editor, so that allows me to just second shoot and have more fun on the jobs, connect with the clients, be the director of or creative director, But all those growth experiences came after sitting with ayahuasca and just seeing the parts of my life that I needed to let go of, transform, grow, and expand. So guys, thank you for watching this video. Thank you for listening to all that. Like it was honestly one of the most pivotal growth and creative, expansive parts of my journey thus far. And if you're called to sit with ayahuasca, like I encourage you to sit with it. You'll know the feeling. Like if Aya's calling you, you'll know it. If you're questioning it, maybe not. But if people are talking about ayahuasca all around you, you're hearing about ceremonies and retreats and stuff, like trust that it's for you. And what I was getting at with this too is like I've never met somebody who sat with ayahuasca and was like, I wish I would have waited. Everybody says it, and including myself, is like, I wish I would have sat with it sooner, because the growth and what it's brought into my life has just been so beneficial to myself as a creative, as an entrepreneur, as a person, as a lover, as a son, just as a whole entire person. And I'd really love to share that experience with you. So if you feel called, please sit with ayahuasca. I'm asking you to sit with ayahuasca, because it will instantly change your life and show you a whole new world that you always knew was there but never thought would actually happen. Peace out, guys.